Before you could speak, your brain was already talking. Not with words, not with sentences, but with patterns, faces, sounds, memories, and warnings. Long before your ancestors could name a river, a predator, or another human, they still had to understand what was happening around them. And that creates a strange question. What did your brain do before language existed? The answer is stranger than simply imagining an ancient person sitting in silence. Your brain did not wait for words before it began making sense of the world. It was already predicting, already remembering, already choosing, already communicating. Language came later, but the mental machinery underneath it was already being built. Imagine waking up somewhere in prehistoric Africa. There is no alarm, no phone, no written message waiting beside you, no voice telling you what happened during the night. You open your eyes and immediately begin reading the environment. Is the fire still warm? Are the other people nearby? Are there fresh tracks outside? Is that sound coming from an animal, another human, or the wind? You do not need a sentence to understand that something has changed. Your brain can detect change before it can describe it. That ability is much older than language. Your ancestors lived inside a world of signals. A broken branch could mean danger. A footprint could mean food. A particular bird call could mean a predator was nearby. A person's facial expression could tell you whether to approach or stay away. None of these signals needed a dictionary. They only needed meaning. And this is where the story becomes fascinating, because your brain does not actually experience the world as a list of words. It experiences shapes, sounds, movement, emotion, memory, and prediction. Language gives those experiences labels, but the experiences themselves came first. Think about recognizing a familiar face. You can know who someone is before you say their name. You can see a person walking toward you and instantly recognize them. The recognition happens before the sentence in your head. Your brain does not need to whisper, "That is my friend." It can simply know. So what happened inside the mind of a human who had not yet developed modern language? Probably far more than you might imagine. One important clue comes from the work of psychologist Michael Tomasello. Tomasello has spent decades studying how humans communicate and how children learn language. His research emphasizes something unusual about human intelligence. Humans are exceptionally good at understanding what another person is trying to do. You can point towards something and another person can look in the same direction. You can stare at an object. Someone else can follow your gaze. You can reach towards something without saying a word, and another person can understand the intention. That ability does not begin with grammar. It begins with shared attention. Before two people can discuss an object, they first have to notice that they are looking at the same object. Before you can tell someone what you want, your brain needs some way to make your intention visible. A hand gesture can do it. A facial expression can do it. A sound can do it. A movement can do it. Language eventually makes these signals vastly more precise. But communication itself is much older. Picture two prehistoric humans walking through a forest. One suddenly freezes. The other stops. The first person looks toward the trees. The second follows the gaze. No sentence is spoken, but a message has already crossed between two brains. Something is there. Something might be dangerous. Pay attention. That tiny interaction contains the basic ingredients of communication: attention, intention, prediction, and trust. Now imagine something even more important. Your ancestors did not only need to understand what was happening right now. They needed to remember what happened before. A dangerous place could be remembered. A useful plant could be remembered. A successful hunting route could be remembered. A person's behavior could be remembered. Memory allowed the past to influence the present, and this may have been one of the most important steps toward language, because once your brain can remember an event, it can eventually begin representing that event. You can remember a place even when you are no longer there. You can remember a person even when they are absent. You can remember an animal after it disappears into the forest. And eventually, you can communicate those things to someone else. That is a huge leap, because now the mind is no longer trapped inside the present moment. It can travel backward, and eventually, it can travel forward. You can imagine what might happen tomorrow. You can imagine where an animal might go. You can imagine what another person might do. You can prepare for something that has not happened yet. This ability to mentally simulate possibilities is one of the hidden powers behind human behavior, and language makes it easier to share those simulations. But the simulations themselves are older. Terence Deacon, an anthropologist and neuroscientist who studied the evolution of human language, argued that language cannot be understood as just a collection of sounds. Language depends on a much deeper ability to connect symbols with meaning. A sound becomes useful when your brain learns that the sound stands for something. That means the real revolution was not simply learning to make more sounds. It was learning to connect arbitrary signals with shared concepts. A particular sound could represent water, another could represent fire, another could refer to a person, another could describe an action. Eventually, an entire world could be carried through sounds. But before that happened, your ancestors already had concepts. They already knew the difference between food and danger. They already knew familiar people from strangers. They already recognized places. They already understood actions. The labels came later, and that changes the way you should think about the first humans who could not speak like you. They were not mentally empty. They were not walking around with nothing inside their heads. Their minds were crowded with information, just not organized into modern sentences. Imagine watching someone prepare a stone tool. You do not need to say, the sharp edge should be positioned this way. Your hands can demonstrate it. Another person can watch. They can imitate. They can correct their movement. They can try again. This is learning without explanation, and it may have been incredibly important. Archaeological evidence shows that early humans repeatedly produced tools with recognizable shapes and techniques. That kind of behavior requires more than random movement. It requires attention, memory, practice, planning, and some ability to understand the actions of another individual. Language would eventually make teaching more efficient, but teaching did not have to begin with sentences. It could begin with demonstration. Look, watch, copy, try, again. That may sound simple, but simple does not mean primitive. A child can learn an incredibly complicated movement just by watching someone else perform it. Your brain is built for imitation. It can extract patterns from movement without turning every movement into words. That is why you can learn how to throw a ball without being able to explain every tiny movement involved. Your body can understand something your vocabulary cannot fully describe. Your ancestors had the same basic ability. Now consider the emotional side of this. Before language, humans still had fear, still had affection, still had anger, still had curiosity, still had jealousy, still had excitement. Emotion does not require vocabulary. Your heart can race before you know why. Your face can react before you choose an expression. You can become nervous before you can explain what you are nervous about. The ancient brain was already using these emotional systems, and emotions themselves could become messages. A frightened face could warn another person. A smile could signal safety. A scream could trigger immediate attention. A threatening posture could stop someone from approaching. In a dangerous environment, these signals could matter more than complicated speech. Then something extraordinary happened over evolutionary time. Human communication became increasingly flexible. Sounds could represent things that were not physically present. Actions could be described. Events could be remembered aloud. Plans could be shared. Warnings could travel farther. Knowledge could survive beyond the individual who discovered it. That is where language becomes more than communication. It becomes a storage system for human knowledge. One person learns something. Another person hears about it. A child learns it later. A community remembers it. Generations inherit information without having to rediscover everything from scratch. This is one reason language changed the human story so dramatically. It allowed information to move between minds, and eventually, between generations. But the deepest surprise is that your brain was preparing for this long before you were born. The modern human brain is not divided into a simple thinking without words part and a language part. Different systems cooperate. Memory helps language. Attention helps language. Social understanding helps language. Prediction helps language. Motor control helps produce speech. And emotion changes how words are understood. Language sits on top of a much older network of abilities. That means the voice inside your head is not the beginning of thought. It is one way thought gets organized. Try something right now. Look around you. Choose an object. Before saying its name in your head, simply look at it. Notice its shape, its color, its position, its texture. You can understand all of those things before naming them. The word is a label placed over an experience. That tiny experiment gives you a glimpse into something ancient. Your brain can understand more than it can say, and your ancestors lived almost entirely inside that space. They thought with images. They thought with sensations. They thought with memories. They thought with movement. They thought with emotion. They thought with prediction. And sometimes, they may have communicated all of it without a single word. There is another twist. Language may have changed not only how humans communicate, but how humans organize their own thoughts. Once you have a word for something, you can hold that concept more easily. You can compare it, describe it, question it, combine it with another idea. You can take something invisible and make it discussable. You can turn a memory into a story, a warning into a rule, a location into a name, a feeling into a concept, and suddenly, your private experience can become shared knowledge. That may be one of the most important transitions in human history. The ancient mind did not suddenly become intelligent when language appeared. It became more powerful at sharing intelligence. That distinction matters, because it means the story of human. Language is not really the story of humans finally learning how to think. It is the story of humans learning how to connect thoughts. One mind could now reach into another mind. A person could describe something that someone else could not see. A hunter could warn a group about a distant danger. A parent could teach a child about a place they had never visited. A storyteller could describe an event that happened years earlier. And eventually, people could discuss things that had never happened at all. Possibilities, plans, dreams, fears, imaginary worlds. That is an extraordinary power. But beneath every sentence is an older system. The ability to notice, the ability to remember, the ability to predict, the ability to understand another person, the ability to assign meaning. Your ancestors had those abilities before they had the words to explain them. So the next time you catch yourself thinking silently, remember what that voice is sitting on top of. Millions of years of attention, millions of years of memory, millions of years of social understanding, millions of years of brains trying to predict what happens next. Language did not create the human mind. It gave the human mind a new way to reveal itself. And that means the strangest thing about your thoughts may be this. You do not need words to think. Words are simply the newest layer over something much, much older. Before you could speak, your brain was already talking. It just wasn't using words yet.